Hello everyone. So first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar, How to Run a Staff Engagement Campaign, which is brought to you by Resource Efficient Scotland. My name is Iwalania Zgoda and I will be your host for today's webinar, which should last approximately 40 to 45 minutes. We are joined today by my colleague, Jess Wemlow. Jess is one of our senior advisors and has worked with organisations across Scotland to help them implement successful staff engagement campaigns. So before we start, just a few points on housekeeping. On screen now, you will see the questions panel. And during today's session, if you would like to ask us a question or on anything covered, you can type your question into the box and click send. You can do that at any time during the webinar and your questions will come to me and we'll then stop to ask the questions at some point during the session as well as at the end of our webinar. If you have a Twitter account, you can also tweet your question to me using the hashtag #ResWebinar. Okay, so that's it from me just now, and I will hand you over to Jess.
Hi everybody. Well, today over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be looking at how you can run a successful staff engagement campaign in your organisation. We're going to run quickly through what we think are the 6 essentials of staff engagement. Then I'm going to hand back to Ivona and she's going to give you her sort of hints and tips on how you can set up and run an effective green team. We're then going to finish off with really looking at how you can maintain momentum in the long term. And also throughout this webinar, we're going to be talking about some of the free Resource Efficient Scotland tools that will be able to help you. So just quickly to cover what the 6 essentials of staff engagement are. Now your staff are your biggest and most influential resource. All staff consume energy, they use water, they use resources, and all staff produce waste. And change is only going to happen if your staff make it happen. Staff engagement is one of the most cost-effective actions that an organisation can take to improve resource efficiency. And there are 6 essential activities that will lead to successful staff engagement, and they're up on screen now. So it's getting management walking the talk, understanding priorities before looking to change behaviour, and stoking a passion for resource efficiency. Now, if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about these 3 essentials, then listen again to our Laying the Foundations for a Successful Staff Engagement Campaign webinar, because that's available on our website now. Today, we're going to look at the final 3 essentials. So growing a greener business with a green team, keeping the conversation going, and sharing success and recognising individuals. So before we start off with the first essential, we're going to run a quick poll. So Ivona, we are up on screen now, should be, do you have an operational and effective green team? So if you can just answer either yes, no, we used to, or not sure. So all the replies are just coming in now. We'll just leave it another couple of seconds for people to answer. Yeah, we're still getting a few more coming in. Okay, excellent. Shall we take a poll now? It should be coming up on screen now what the answer is.
Okay, so we have about 47% respondents say they do have a green team. So
that's great.
Some of the tips on keeping the momentum will be helpful, but we also have about 18% of delegates who don't have a green team. So we'll talk a little bit about setting up a green team in your organisation. Okay, so setting up and running a successful green team. Now, throughout the presentation, we'll be using the term green team, but it's worth noting that the term can be changed to committee or working group to fit in with the culture of your organisation. Now, the benefits of having a green team. Green team can play a leading role when it comes to engaging staff across your organisation. Your employees will have an excellent knowledge about how their colleagues will react to a new scheme or initiative. So setting up a green team is also a great way to tackle the notion that those at the top of the company might not understand those at the bottom. So by letting employees from different levels come up with ideas, you can ensure that they are accessible for all. The green team also helps the flow of information and gets everyone involved. So this participation encourages schemes to thrive as employees and departments see each other getting more and more involved. In order to make sure there are resources available to the team, for example, time or a small budget, it's important to get the senior management on board from the very beginning. Now on the screen, you can see a short presentation that we developed on benefits of setting up a green team. You can download a free presentation from our website and tailor it to communicate with your senior management. So before we look at the role of the green team, I would like to stress how important it is to understand why you are doing it and how it feeds into the organization's objectives. Environmental activity should not be seen as a bolt-on to organizational procedures. In fact, it should be a part of everyday working life, not just something to keep the stakeholders happy or tick the boxes. So it's worth communicating with your sustainability officer or energy manager to see how the green team will fit into that picture. The green team can take a number of roles. It can gather suggestions from the staff, so work as a conduit. Team members are in great position to liaise with relevant teams and discuss resource efficiency at the local level. They can provide guidance and cascade the information so they can monitor and benchmark sustainability performance with a little bit of data collection element to it as well. In some smaller organizations, they can also develop policies where this hasn't been done yet. And they can set a positive example. So a green team can develop models for particular types of behaviour you're looking to promote in your organisation. Now, choosing the right people. Choosing enthusiastic and knowledgeable individuals is key to the success of your sustainable initiatives. These will be the leaders that other employees look to for guidance and information. So it's key to focus on recruiting green team members. There is no right way to select a green team, and each way has its own challenges. You can choose to ask for volunteers. Now, it's a great way, the advantage being that once signed up, they are often very proactive and willing to learn, as they are donating their time to help the initiative. The risk of this is that if people volunteer, they may only want to participate at certain times when they have less work. The second option is to assign tasks to the heads of your departments. Now, if you select staff that are enthusiastic and realise the importance of the sustainability scheme, there's no reason why this method should not be just as effective. The risk here, again, is that many employees who are assigned these schemes may see them as extra work that isn't their responsibility, and therefore they may not carry out the task to the best of their ability. And the third option is to prepare an online survey. So generally, these will ask a few questions about behaviour and attitude towards environmental issues. The behaviours are then segmented into categories, and then people with most positive attitudes could then be considered for the position. Now, something to remember is the method of selection must come down to the experience of each individual business. So do people take their responsibilities more seriously and put more energy into them if they believe that it's part of their job? Or are they more likely to stay committed and focus on tasks if they volunteer to do the work as an extra activity? And again, to ensure further senior management involvement, we have developed a letter to all managers. Now, the letter asks for the support for the time an employee will spend at the team meeting, but also the time needed in between the meetings to implement the actions. This helps to formalise the organisation's commitment to the green team members. Question that is rarely asked by a green team member is, what's in it for me? It's far too common to hear green teams recruiting members because it's best for the business. Now, while the business benefits should remain a key motivator for any green team, we need to stop and consider how a green team will benefit an individual member. There are many benefits that for employees to get involved. So one of them is enhancing your CV and gaining new skills. Networking. For many employees, the Green Team provides introductions and exposure to other roles and departments within the business, but also a sense of purpose. People like to have a sense of belonging, and this is no different within the workplace. Green Team members enjoy being part of something which increases their networks and visibility within the company. Resource Efficient Scotland prepared a poster you can use to draw employees' attention to the opportunities linked to being on the Green Team. So once you've chosen your members, you can then think about the job description and appointment letter. For a Green Team to be effective, team members will need clear guidance about their aims, objectives, and the scope of tasks that they will be required to deliver. A good way to make this happen is to create and share a job description and allocate specific tasks to each Green Team member. Once you have selected the Green Team members, issue each one with an official appointment letter. The appointment letter should outline the Green Team's role, as well as the training provided and the amount of time allocated for each task. So the Green Team has been selected. What to do next? I would recommend to review the representation in the team. Are all areas of your company represented? If there are parts of the organisation that are not, are there any teams or units where you have to strategically approach someone and ask for their input from their depot, site or team? Also, it's worth involving internal communications to help with writing and communicating Green Team stories. The next step is to develop an action plan. So once the members have been selected and Green Team has an understanding of how the organisation is performing, it will become clearer what actions should be made priority. My suggestion is don't try to do everything at once. Start by focusing on a few key priorities. So some of the questions you can ask your Green Team is, what happens to our waste? Are we mapping the areas where waste is generated? Do we monitor our energy use? Do we gather data on water? Have we checked leaks in the building? And then the information can be collated in the form of a table just to show, just to identify the actions. Now, if you're still looking for ideas, you can access our Resource Efficient Scotland Savings Finder, and this provides an outline of the opportunities in energy, water and waste that you can explore further with your Green Team. When it comes to implementing your action plan, so once you prepare the action plan, remember to give Green Team members specific actions. These could include putting up posters on notice boards, raising the resource efficiency agenda in team meetings, checking recycling containers are in the right place, as well as taking resource use measurements or delivering brief training sessions. And now, once the team has been active for some time, the question often asked is, how do we keep the enthusiasm going? Some ideas are normally implemented following the first meeting, but as months pass by, activity becomes less and less, and new savings are harder to identify. So to keep your Green Team motivated, remember to prepare a clear strategy and measure how you are performing as a team. So prioritise your activity over a year-long programme. This action plan will then form your Green Team agenda for the year ahead and ensure the activity is manageable. And also, very important, publicise Green Team success. You should always make sure that you are taking action to publicise Green Team successes, however small, through intranet or newsletter articles or blogs, team briefings, as well as personal performance reviews. Again, this will help to motivate Green Team members and maintain the support and commitment of other staff. The Green Team meetings can also be used to troubleshoot typical barriers to success, either being too problem focused, lack of progress, balancing main job role with Green Team role. Now, the problem-focused part, steer your discussion towards thinking about your targets, where you would like to be, and then the action solution required to get there. With the lack of progress, address any knowledge or skills barriers with training or work shadowing, and escalate persistent procedural barriers to your senior management. When it comes to balancing the main role with green team role, be clear on the amount of time to be spent on tasks and reallocate them if you feel that green team members are struggling. Again, just speak to the green team members to make sure that they're not under pressure, and speak to the senior management to seek their help. So these are some of my tips and hints for setting up and running a green team. But if you'd like to find out more, you can use our 8 steps to an effective green team, which can be accessed on our website.
Brilliant, Ivona. There was some great tips there. I think we were going to take just a few questions before moving on to the next essential. So I think we've got a few coming in just now. We've got one here from a company in Glasgow, and they're saying, how often should a green team meet?
That's a great question. Now, there is no one answer. It's always worth just taking a step back, looking at your team members' commitments. Again, bearing in mind that majority of team members will have other targets. So I would say probably once a month could be too often, so between maybe 6 weeks to quarterly meetings. And also I would recommend to keep the meeting to a maximum of 90 minutes in order to keep the members engaged during the meetings.
Okay, we've got another one here from an organisation in Hawick, and it sounds like they've already got a green team, but they're struggling to kind of coordinate the efforts across quite a number of different sites that they've got across Scotland. Have you got any suggestions for how the best way to approach that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose you can either choose to be very specific with the purpose of the green team, or you can recognise the diversity between the sites and allow them to carry out their own projects. But whatever you do, make sure that the communication is consistent. You can use video conferencing, Skype for Business, help the teams to communicate to one another. And also, intranet is great for saving files rather than sending it back and forth. So also review any projects on an ongoing basis, so the local projects feed into the greater targets.
Okay, I think that's all those questions. We'll have another opportunity for questions towards the end of the webinar, so we'll just crack on. Okay, so we're moving on to the next essential, keep the conversation going. So this is all about, I think before we start on this actually, before I forget, I think we're going to have a quick poll. So Ivona, do you want to get that on screen?
So the question we'd like to ask is, do you run resource efficiency campaign or focus activities in your organisation?
So yeah, if you want to answer that, it's just yes, no, you might sometimes do, but you don't regularly.
And we're just waiting for the votes to come through. Okay, I think we're ready to publish them. Right, so 40% of our respondents do, and 33 sometimes, but not regularly.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite even across there. Yeah, no, it's great to see that 40% of you are running resource efficiency campaigns. Hopefully you'll get some sort of hints and tips over the next couple of essentials. So we'll move on to it now. Okay, so this is all about how you actually maintain momentum and how you maintain interest in your resource efficiency initiatives. I think it's easier for people to make real long-term change to their behaviours if they're asked to do one thing at a time. I think asking for many changes at once can really cause confusion about what it is you're actually asking people to do. So you do need to keep it simple. Perhaps identify the top 3 to 5 actions that you want to change every year. You're going to get that from the action plan that Ivona talked about in the last section. And then really think about running ongoing, single-minded campaigns, really to keep resource efficiency at the forefront of people's mind. Provide reasons and support for staff and also visitors to adopt new resource-efficient behaviours. And allow time for that new behaviour really to embed into daily routines before moving on to the next behavioural change. I think many organisations sometimes approach a resource efficiency campaign and, you issue an email announcement to all your employees with a long list of expected behaviours to be implemented and the consequences if people don't actually do it. And you might place some signs around and put some posters around the work floors to really reinforce that message. And, that goes down like a lead balloon. Nothing changes and your employees are just stuck in their old habits. So if that's the case, you just need to simplify things. You need to focus on one clear outcome first. A series of small, measurable wins will really add up to serious momentum over time and really do a lot more to shift the culture towards resource efficiency. I think this is a sort of a campaign timetable, and it really shows that you should develop it around peaks and lulls. Peaks of activities where you're establishing new behaviours, kind of follow on reinforcement messages, and then kind of relative lulls to consolidate those behaviours before introducing new ones. I think sometimes people think with the resource efficiency campaign, you always need to be putting more information out and new information out. Well, that's not the case. Feel confident that you just allow that little bit of period, that little lull before you introduce new information. I think it's sometimes a little bit like a heartbeat where you're going to have a strong pulse followed by a weaker one, a rest and a strong pulse again. And you can really build momentum by adding new behaviours over time, using a range of communication channels to strengthen your message, and also communicating success and progress towards your overall targets, really to create a sense of ongoing progress and achievement. And I'll talk about this a little bit more next. Now, those 3 things will really help you develop momentum and demonstrate, there's no going back. This is the way that our organisations does things around here now. And it is important to use a variety of different methods to ensure that all staff are going to be exposed to the key messages you want to get across. There are things, emails, displays, posters, staff newsletters, team meetings, training that we talked about in the last webinar, even digital signage, toolbox talks, brown bag lunches, drop-in sessions. And don't be scared of the one-to-one. I sometimes think that that's the most effective. Just getting out there and talking to people, having like a 5-minute slot in like a weekly briefing meeting, when people can actually speak to you and really understand what the purpose of the campaign is. That really does, that's a really effective way to get the message across. I'd also try and identify times when your staff are under less work pressure, because they're more likely to pay attention. So avoid perhaps holiday periods. Over the summer months aren't always the best time to run resource efficiency campaigns because you're going to have so many people on annual leave. Or there might be periods where your organisation is particularly busy, maybe towards the end of the financial year or in the lead up to Christmas. Avoid those periods as well. I'd also say coordinate your activities to run at the same time as perhaps national campaigns. We've got Climate Week in March, we've got Earth Day in April, we've got Recycle Week in June, we've got World Water Week in September. That really allows you to piggyback on what's other activities, other promotion that's going on around the issue. So people's awareness are going to be raised slightly, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to get your message across. And those are just a handful of them. There's so many days and weeks related to sort of environmental messages. So it is worth doing a research on the internet. This is just really showing what I mean by that. This is quite a specific timetable for a lighting switch off campaign. So it's over an 8-week period, and it is developed around peaks and lulls. So you've got an initial flurry of activity over a week or two, followed by a quiet time to allow people to adopt the new behaviours. And you can use, here they're using a variety of different communication channels, so the email, intranet, face-to-face and notice boards. But it's important that you share the reasons why you're launching things like a switch off campaign, outlining any proposed changes. Perhaps you've got new signage, new stickers, outline what the timescales are, what behaviours you want to see staff adopt, and the benefits of those new behaviours. And you can see there's some actions in there to try and keep activities fresh by regularly updating them. Static communications like posters and stickers and signs, they do merge into the background after a few times of people seeing them. So I think those static communications are great, but you just need to make sure that you're constantly maybe updating the message or updating the design or even updating the position, just moving them around the sort of the office, your organisation, because then that will just kind of keep that impact going. And there is a lot of repetition in this campaign timetable. That's because your staff are going to need to undertake an action a number of times before the habit sticks. When something isn't natural behaviour, you need triggers, you need cues. The more your staff repeat the behaviour, the more automatic it will become until it's habit. So repetition is good in a resource efficiency campaign. Okay, now we're perhaps thinking about rewarding your staff. Now, there are a wide array of individual and social factors that influence whether people engage or whether they don't engage. The factors that influence what we do include our values, our attitudes, our skills, any perceived personal costs or benefits, but also social factors, like social norms and the networks that you actually have sort of within the organisation and the relationships that you have with people in the organisation. They all influence how your staff are going to behave. Therefore, an effective campaign can be around those that have visual benefits, as well as those that incorporate an element of collective effort and competition to promote a sort of shift in behaviour as part of a group. So you should consider maybe reward schemes as a tool for engaging staff. You might prefer to do this as a trial in selected buildings or teams first before rolling them out wider across your organisation. So just a few ideas. I think this is one that some organisations have been using sort of more over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, rewarding resource efficient behaviours. Things like, getting your staff to remember to switch off their computer screen at the end of the day. Perhaps you could place sweets or chocolates or even just put a green flag on PC monitors or any other equipment, to be honest, that need to be switched off at the end of the day. For those that are left on, you can have a reminder sticker or a red flag that just serves as a gentle reminder, but a highly visible reminder about they should be switching their equipment off. I think for this to work, though, it's worth bearing in mind that, that person needs to be at the same desk or using the same equipment day after day. So it might not be so appropriate if you use hot desking within your organisation. You could also establish some kind of league table. It's got energy actually up on screen, but this could be it for anything, for energy consumption, for water consumption, or even maybe a reduction in waste generated or proportion of waste recycled. And this could be a league table between different departments or different buildings or even different teams. Now, this system does rely on each distinct area having their energy meters or water meters or accurate sort of monitoring of waste. It's also important that if you are thinking about some kind of league table, really to make the system as fair as possible. This can be achieved by ensuring that energy use across buildings is equally within the control of occupants. That rather than one building, it might be more influenced by not having such good insulation or something like that. And I'd also say you need to measure it. For instance, if you're doing energy, perhaps doing energy consumption per occupant, because that means if you've got any fluctuations in staff leaving the organisation or new staff coming into the organisation, it doesn't affect the results in any way. You might also want to consider running a competition. This could be a prize to recognise the efforts of an individual, Or again, you could link it back to the league table and award a prize for a team or a department. And you can really get creative with this to get people thinking about resource efficiency more often as they go about their day-to-day job. You could offer a prize for a photo that communicates the best resource efficiency practice at work. Or you could link a prize to maybe an annual suggestion scheme, or reward the person that spots the best resource efficiency opportunity in your organisation. And that prize could even be, money towards a local charity or a local community group. That's just some ideas about using rewards to engage staff. But we have actually published 10 ideas for using rewards to engage staff, kind of guidance. And that's available for free. You can download that for free from the Resource Efficient Scotland website. Okay, so we're almost at the end, and we're just going to, before we move on to the last essential, we were just going to run another quick poll.
We're just going to launch a question. Do you monitor the impact of your staff engagement campaigns? So that should be on your screens just now.
So yeah, yes, no, sometimes, or we don't run staff engagement campaigns.
Okay, and we'll just wait a couple more seconds for the votes to come in.
Okay, I think that's everyone.
And we'll just share the results with you. So again, a quite even split. We have 39% sometimes monitor the impact, 28% who currently don't run any staff engagement campaigns. So hopefully some great ideas here. 22 monitor, so that's great.
Okay, no, that's really great. It's really hard, I think, to monitor the impact of a staff engagement campaign. So I'm going to cover a few tips sort of in this next essential. So the final essential, share success and recognise individuals. I think the key part for new behaviours, people need to have continual reassurance that the efforts they're making are having a positive effect. Otherwise, what's the point? I think regularly communicating success, you've got to consider that in your campaign planning, as it's vital for demonstrating that the investment of time and resources have been worthwhile. I think going back to momentum as well, it also helps build up that long-term momentum, and sharing information on resource efficiency improvements is really a great way of acknowledging the efforts that your colleagues have actually put in. Sharing success, I think it also can really help gain the support of staff who have been resistant to change by demonstrating the results that the people around them are already achieving. So it is important to provide staff with regular updates on the impact they're having in a way that's relevant to them, and that's really important. So report on how you're progressing towards your targets, highlighting positive behaviours, and mention perhaps any improvements that might be required. But in doing so, and this is coming back to the monitoring, you're going to need to have ongoing monitoring of resource use data during and after periods where you're asking our staff to change their behaviours. I think measuring and monitoring, it can seem really daunting at first, especially when it comes to staff engagement, because it can be really hard to measure. But there are simple and effective methods that can bring about significant benefits. I think the first stage, you've got to decide what you want to monitor and understand how you're actually going to do it. Take time to consider how you're going to gather the data to actually measure kind of staff attitudes and measure the impact. You can measure progress through resource use data, observations, or even some kind of really simple staff awareness survey. This could include energy use, water use, the waste generated, how much you're recycling, fuel consumption, levels of awareness towards resource efficiency, attitudes towards resource efficiency, even down to things like number of hits on your intranet, or number of people trained, or even number of posters on display. Lots of different things that you consider. In addition, also think about lessons learned during the campaign. I think people sometimes shy away from that. It is important to record them and feed back into the development of any future activities. If things haven't gone well, if that hasn't had the impact that you wanted, you've just got to understand why that is and make sure that you take that on board for your next campaign. Don't give up, it didn't work, it doesn't work in this organisation. Think about why, so it can feed in. Be open to positive and negative feedback. And if performance isn't expected, as Ivona said, sort of in the Green Champion section, take corrective action and just ensure that good practice is embedded into your everyday policies and procedures. We do have up on screen a free measuring and monitoring spreadsheet that's available to download from our website. And that will help you collate and analyse all your measurement data. And the spreadsheet, it's got a number of tabs and there's sort of instructions in there that really provides a really good basic template that can be edited for your own organisation. Now, you've got to ensure that your staff communication has a strong impact. So it's best to talk about any successes in a tangible way, because that's going to help your staff visualize success. Because, sometimes when we talk about tons of carbon dioxide or tons of waste or kilowatt hours of electricity, what does that actually mean? What does that mean to your staff? The average person sees hundreds, maybe even thousands of advertising messages every day. And that's also worth bearing in mind. As proud as you are of showing, your resource efficiency improvements, your messaging really has to compete really, really hard for your colleagues' attention. So you've got to make it fun, you've got to make it thought-provoking, and you've got to make it attention-grabbing, because that will stand a much better chance of people taking the time to consider what those messages are really saying. So use interesting images. People are put off by loads of text. Think about photographs and cartoons and graphs. Now, there's a fact up on screen now, and that's actually taken from our 13 resource-efficient facts, fun facts that can be downloaded for free from our website. And there's facts about haggis and Edinburgh trams and tea cakes and the M8 and Hampden. And it really is great because it really gives you sort of attention-grabbing messages that can accompany your communications campaign. And just the last couple of slides, I would say this links back to rewarding your staff, but do reward good behaviour. I think the best way to share success is to appreciate the efforts your employees are making. So do consider running something like a award scheme to recognise employees or even teams who have made an effort to adopt new resource-efficient behaviours. It doesn't need to be a lot of work. It could be monthly, it could be yearly. And you might also want to offer sort of non-financial rewards like staff recognition or maybe even sort of voluntary benefits. They might also be able to recognise opportunities through entering external rewards like the Scottish Green Apples Award Scheme or even the Vibes Awards. And I think sometimes we just don't say thank you. I think sometimes a simple thank you, that can have a real impact, especially if it comes from your staff's line managers or sort of a company director. And you can go as far as linking resource efficiency goals into staff performance appraisals. This might be more appropriate for managers or staff who might have a key role to play in influencing a team's achievement of a resource efficiency target. But depending on your organisation's appraisal system, this performance could then contribute to decisions around pay rises or bonuses or promotions. Okay, excellent. So we're coming to the end of the webinar. So that over the last two webinars, we've really outlined what the 6 essentials are of staff engagement. And then remember, if you are interested in hearing about those first 3 essentials, then listen again to our Laying the Foundations for a Successful Staff Engagement campaign that's available on our website now.
Okay, we also have a number of different materials available. We have the Green Champions training, which is a free online training. It's easily accessible to everyone. You can register and just learn about resource efficiency through some bite-sized modules, so you can fit it in and around your work times. And also, just before we move to some questions, I would just like to highlight that we have a number of workshops coming up. So in our staff engagement series, we have another one coming up on the 25th of August in Edinburgh Zoo. We'll be talking about the 6 essentials of staff engagement in a bit more detail. It's a half-day workshop. There'll be different workshops to follow about energy, waste, water, and also we'll have the 2 Green Champions Live events in November. And right before we move to questions, just to let you know, we do have an opportunity to speak to one of our advisors and get some free one-to-one advice. So we found that on average, we can identify about £18,000 of saving. And it's just by speaking to one of our consultants, looking at the opportunities in your organisation.
Yeah, and just with that free one-to-one advice, I'd really recommend sort of getting in contact about that, because it's free. And even if you think you're doing everything you can, sometimes it's just good to have that kind of fresh pair of eyes, just looking over kind of what you're doing for resource efficiency, what you're doing for staff engagement. Because, even if that's just a reassurance that you're going along the right line, then, that would be good for you.
And before we move to questions, we'll just ask if anyone would like one of our advisors to get in touch and just discuss these opportunities in a bit more detail. So I'll launch the poll just now. It should come up on your screen. And if you would like one of our advisors to get in touch, then you can just hit yes now.
Okay, that's great. We'll just wait another little bit. No, that's great.
Mm-hmm. And moving on to some of the questions that came through, we had Rory from Aberdeen asking, so Jess, you talked about rewarding staff. What kind of rewards actually work?
That's a really good question. I think rewards are designed as a way to kind of show your staff your appreciation for kind of your staff's hard work. And I think financial rewards, when you talk about rewards, people sometimes think it has to be financial rewards. That is often a good motivator, but I think sometimes the non-financial rewards can sometimes have the most impact on staff morale. And regardless of whatever benefit you actually offer, whatever reward you offer to staff, I think you need to create an atmosphere where hard work is recognised, where you're recognising the efforts of your staff. And financial rewards, they don't need to break the bank. It can be anything from cinema tickets to gift vouchers, travel passes, membership to a local gym, or, tickets to even the theatre show. And you can also, offer rewards to donate money to charities or good causes. I think non-financial rewards, it's just sending an email to that person just with congratulations on a job well done, or mentioning success during kind of monthly meetings, or even I think an article on the intranet just talking about what that person has done. I think some organisations even go a little bit further and maybe hold kind of monthly or quarterly awards events. Again, it doesn't need to be very much. It can just be sort of over lunchtime, 10, 15 minutes, which just really showcasing the efforts of staff.
Yeah, great. We have another question from Stuart from Motherwell. He asks, we don't have any money to develop campaign materials. And our IT department doesn't really have the time to design new materials. What do you suggest?
Yeah, that can be a tricky one, and I think it can be a problem that a lot of organisations have. And I think especially, in sort of how we've been trying to sort of tighten our belts, and I think organisations do have less money around for this kind of thing. I would kind of direct you to the Resource Efficient Scotland website, because there's loads of kind of free resources that you'd be able to download and use. There's everything from, I think, running a switch off campaign, so there's posters and web banners and switch off stickers. There's running a leak reporting campaign. Again, there's sort of posters and web banners you can use. There's materials to help you encourage your staff recycle more. So there's sort of downloadable recycling signage and kind of awareness raising kind of posters that you can print off. And there's also a free poster creator tool. If you're in the hospitality sector, actually, there's also some good resources to help you engage with your customers on sort of water efficiency. I think there's a door hanger that you can use, so you can put on guest for guests where, you know, if they don't need their room cleaned, and there's a linen and towel reuse card that you can leave in guest bathrooms, so you can get the message across from there. So yeah, I'd really recommend just going on the Resource Efficient Scotland website and just seeing all those kind of free resources.
And last question, we have a question from Simon from Edinburgh, and Simon asks, we are a large company with many sites across Scotland. I have struggled to monitor any impact and get the data at the right time. Do you have any advice on this?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one. It's always really tough if you've got lots of different sites that you're trying to gather data from. I think first thing you've got to do is really review the data that you're collecting and make sure that you have everything you need and everything you're asking for has a purpose. I think people are far more inclined to perhaps collect and submit data if they really understand, you know, what is being used for, what are the benefits of it. So you might want to look at kind of the communications around, you know, those people and how you actually tell them about why you need that data. And linked to that, I think also is accountability. I think no matter what system you have in place, whether you've got an in-house spreadsheet, I don't know what he's using, or, you know, sometimes you have IT platforms these days, you know, you need accountability. Who's responsible in that organisation for entering that data and